So why don't you describe a little bit about the attendance protocols here at Camino Nuevo?
Attendance. We first off start off with, if any students who are tardy, they, get a tardy slip every time they come in the morning. By 9:15, teachers do have to take attendance. So I always go and, check in the system, make sure they've taken attendance. If they have not taken attendance yet, then I go ahead and email them, remind them, to please take attendance as soon as they can. If they have not, then, that's a whole other thing. I tend to either go to the classroom or call them, to remind them to take attendance.
So every teacher on campus has to have attendance done by 9:15.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What about multiple period teachers?
They they still have them take attendance for every period as well.
And there's it has to be done within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the period. Is there some type of
within the 10 minutes or so? Yeah. Sometimes we have substitute teachers, so obviously we make sure we get the attendance sheet from them as well.
Okay.
Once we make sure that all attendance is taken, we do go ahead and print out, a sheet of all the kids who are absent. Once that occurs, we, because we do have a robocall going out either way that, automatically goes out to the parents, telling them, please call the main office, your son or daughter was marked absent for today. We want to make sure, verify the absence. And we still, between my coworkers and I here, we also, call the parents as well either way, just to make sure a student is actually absent, the reason why they're absent, we need to make sure they bring in a note as well, their doctors, or they stayed at home sick, just make sure that way it could be an excused absent.
Okay, and then for chronic tardies, chronic absenteeism?
For those, it's Ms. Duran that, usually talks with parents, if it's chronic absence where they're just constantly absent, we do, stay on top of it, trying to contact parents, make sure if it is because they're sick, we do have a 10-day policy where if the student is absent for 10 days in a row, they are, in a sense, taken out of the system. We do have, that rule in place. That way a new student could be, come in if, for those, 10 or more absences. But if they are sick or, hospitalized for whatever reason, we do ask them to bring in the note beforehand. That way those 10 days won't affect them.
I guess how do you incentivize, right? So typically one of the major problems at the school is first period tardies. You have 30, 40 kids showing up late. So how would you address that particular issue?
With parents or
with parents, with students. How do you? What is the school doing to try to
minimize those?
That?
Like I said, we do phone calls. A lot of the times, sometimes it happens where the students, are marked absent. Obviously, before the tardy slips come in and we input them. So sometimes parents, receive those phone calls. They're like, oh, well, why is my child being marked absent? When he's actually there, and we tell them, it's because they were tardy, and then that's when they're like, oh, okay. And then we have noticed, parents trying to after they see those phone calls or see that they are being marked absent, and then they start worrying. So that tends to help out in that area. But we do have Ms. Duran, who checks those periodically and so meets with parents and talks about it. I know the teachers as well. When they do parent conferences, they bring the tardiness up.
Attendance. You work with any other issues? Systems or operations here besides just
attendance? I do, field trips. I recently got, they gave me report cards to work on. I do IEPs, the individualized education program, so I tend to schedule those meetings for teachers and parents.
Okay, so schedule all the IEPs. Is there anything unique that you would do with the field trips and scheduling those?
No, I just get a request and, make sure the bus is here with the kids, have their lunches as well. I'm also in charge of ordering lunches.
Okay.
But just, simple, making sure they have a bus and lunch.
So school operations, just kind of describe a little bit how behind the scenes working of the school, something that...
Well, as a charter school is a little different than a regular school because our charter comes with all the duties. Sometimes you're busy working with certain tasks and something else comes up and you have to, jump into and take care of other stuff at the same time. But operations, you're pretty much in charge of ordering supplies, making sure the office it's running smoothly. We have enough materials for everybody to be comfortable, and making sure the teachers are have all the materials they use for the need for the classroom. Yeah, so you got me kind of off guard.
Okay.
But
So when you're talking about ordering supplies, what is kind of the system behind? Say
Well-
a teacher needs markers. I mean, is there?
we have like a closet full of materials, and we have also our another staff who's in charge of making sure everything's up to date, and we have all the materials that the teachers request. So usually we get an email from the teacher, hey, do I need 30 pencils, and making sure everything's stacked up.
And then somebody just does inventory on that.
Correct. We do inventory at least once a month to make sure we're still okay.
Okay. So it's just pretty simple tracking.
It's tracking. It's a lot of processing invoices, making sure all bills are paid, creating invoices, and making sure we're putting all cash that comes in through the office. With parents pay for lunch, make sure we're collecting that properly, recording it, and then making sure it gets deposited also.
Okay. And
Okay.
what's the recording system like?
I'm sorry?
What's the recording system like?
We'll use the system Power School, where parents come in, give their cash checks, and they get a receipt. We put in the Power School, tells you who logged in, how much was logged in, and then it gets turned into me. If the ladies at the front office pick it up, I create an invoice and just process to all our payroll procedures or XN. In this case, it will be XN, who oversees our account.
Okay. So Power School, I know a lot of charter schools use Power School. Do you guys have somebody specifically that's been trained by Power School to
We
use the system?
Yeah, we have our office support where there's two personnel that pretty much teachers, or we have any questions, we go to them. But it's a pretty simple software to use.
So at my school, we have Power School, but I don't think we use it to full capacity. It's mainly just for attendance and logging, discipline, things like that. So what are some of the features of Power School that you use that other people might not take advantage of?
We do a lot of messaging. We'll put notes in Power School. Sometimes there's a lot of confidentiality involved. Maybe parents are going through situations, personal situations where a parent could pick up a student in certain days, some parent cannot pick a student in certain days, so we make sure the alert gets logged onto Power School. So when the front office releases a student, they're making sure that it gets released to the right person. Vaccinations, make sure everything's up to date. And our home office support also uses it for state reporting. So if everything's up to date, we shouldn't have any issues. We also upload our pictures, so making sure we know when someone gets released, we know who the student is according to the pictures and the person picking them up. So yeah. But attendance will probably be the biggest need for.
Talking about school culture, not a lot of schools have a dean of culture, so can you just, what is that position like?
So here at our school, what some of the things I'm in charge of is supervision, attendance, discipline, celebrations, school-wide celebrations, or individual celebrations. I think those are the big advisories for middle school. We have kids are divided into different advisories, and so I'm in charge of making sure that kids get to their advisory, or helping advisory teachers figure out what they want to do. So our advisories, teachers choose a topic that they're interested in, and then, for example, dancing or cooking, or like community development, things like that. So soccer is a big one. So I help teachers kind of figure out what they might want to do for their advisory, and then just support them along the way if they're having, any kind of like trouble with their topic that they chose. And it's like it took off really great, but now it's kind of like tapered off. What can we do? Yeah.
Okay, so it's an administrative position.
Yes.
And then school-wide celebrations. So would you say like the school is using PBIS methodology?
Yeah, there's some of that going on. We have, for example, my campus aides are right there. They're in charge of supervision out in the yard, so I have weekly PD meetings with them. So one of the things we came up with was there were a lot of consequences for not doing things in the cafeteria and in the yard or leaving trash. What are some positive things that we have? And so they came up with like we should give them awards or free dress, assign table monitors. So they give awards to the kids who have done a really great job of cleaning up, of the monitors who we have table monitors for the upper elementary and middle school, and so they give free dress awards to them. We do have attendance awards, so perfect attendance awards that we give out, and we give out like Yogurtland passes for them and their family. What other kind? We are in a new building, so we haven't been able to do much of this, but we used to do a core value of the month or a quarter. We had a lot of quarterly awards, but with our move to our new campus, we've kind of put that on hold. Our annual talent show's coming up, so that's another kind of celebration, celebrating individual talents that the kids have, and it's interesting how much you find out about them through just like a talent show. Like a lot of our kids go out and learn an instrument, and they can come and show it off here. We have kids who dance a tango, and it's just really awesome.
So what are the core values of the school?
So right now we had core values, and then we moved to Belmont. I don't know if Heather told you we were Prop 39, and so that kind of all stopped because we didn't have an auditorium, and here we don't have an auditorium. So the core values that we used to have, that we need to now come back as a staff and look, are these still our values? Are integrity, pride, respect, and responsibility. So those were our 4 core values that actually came from students a few years, I want to say about 8 years ago. And so as a staff, I feel like we need to come back and revisit those. And I think that's our aim for next year is to, okay, now that we know movement around campus, now that we know a lot of other components, what do we want to our school culture to really be like? So this year's it's been about setting up a lot of systems. And so next year will be more diving in deeper as to like, what do we want? If we want core values, even, so. Yeah.
So this year, setting up systems and getting ready to dive into the core values. So, what are you doing this year to really kind of direct the staff towards wanting core values? I mean, any organization needs core values, needs something that is at the heart of what it does. So.
Right. I mean, we're really driven by our mission statement, so we always start every year with that, wherever we've been, that's our guiding, the guiding force behind the work that we do. We really believe in that every kid should be ready, prepared to go to college if that's the option that they want to take. But in what the words that we might want to focus, I don't know that because we how can I explain it? I feel like the words that we choose need to come from everyone, and so we need to work together to figure out what it is that we want. So we have a lot of readings. We have like last year we read Peter Drucker's Opening Minds book about language about growing a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So a lot of us were like, oh wow, the kind of language we use is really important, and so guiding through PDs, those kind of conversations in PD, doing a lot of reading and research. And I know we have a study group who's looking into discipline and how other schools might be doing it. So I know in terms of how we do it, our suspension rate is really low. I want to say we have 3 this year, and March is usually our highest month for suspensions, and so this year we had no suspensions in March, and I think it's really because of how the conversations are guided around building relationships, and so that's become core to what we do, is building relationships with families and children so that they can really so that we can understand where whatever the behavior is coming from, and how we can best support them. And then instead of shunning the kid from campus, it's like bringing them in and talking about why things are happening, and having them build empathy towards whoever it is that they hurt, either, in whatever way they hurt the other student. Does that make sense?
So are you using some restorative practices?
Yeah, definitely. And, I don't think we call it restorative justice, but we definitely do use it. I feel like it's always been organic at our campus. Like, let's sit down and talk about what happened, and let's sit down with both parties and everyone who works with the students. So it's really a team approach also.
So just in listening to you for the last few minutes, talk about the school and the culture of the school, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, just to try to summarize or paraphrase here. But the school culture is really about building relationships, teamwork, developing the core values that are going to support your mission and vision moving forward, and using professional development time this year to really guide the staff to that point next year where they will sit down and have a conversation about what are our 3 to 5 things that are going to drive us moving forward.
Right. Yeah.
And then discipline-wise, again, working with parents, students.
Right, with families. Sometimes, they'll say, can I bring my mom, because my mom watches them, and so we'll talk to grandma too, or we have parents who are divorced and really want to, so we make accommodations for that. And we know that a lot of our kids come with trauma, so we have counseling available for them. So just working in a team to figure out how we can be the best support we can.
And you guys have an on-site mental health person?
Right, we have from LACDC, they send in a few interns. Dee Hirsch sends over a therapist, and I have a PPS credential, so I also do some counseling with some of the kids. So it's not your traditional, you get in trouble and, there's and all the consequences, of course, there's consequences, they're fitting to whatever the child's need is, And so if it's attention-seeking behavior, then we'll do it in a positive way. If it's, just extra time, they need extra time on an assignment or whatever it is, we work to figure out what that is.
So do you still have the traditional code of conduct, right? So if you do this behavior 10 times, this is the first time you do this, the second time we call parents, the third time?
Not really. I feel like we take each case individually, I feel like all behaviors that happen in school need to be dealt with it in school. We call the parent as a courtesy, hey, this happened, for taking care of it, not as a, this happened, what are you going to do about it? It's not, we need to help the student, because it's a microcosm of how they're going to be in larger, outside of here, outside of the community. So we need to be able to make sure that they can regulate their own behavior and be independent from, helping them think for themselves, why it's a good thing to do X versus this, Yeah, so like intrinsic motivation, helping them develop that.
Okay. So discipline, I think that's the other thing that we need to really capture is, you said it's
And really, when they come to me and they think they're in trouble, I'm like, you're not in trouble with me. I'm like, the one you hurt is your friend. So if you lie, you're not lying to me. Your friend knows what you did. So how can you fix it with your friend so that it doesn't happen again? Because, you know, I love you no matter what. Is your friend gonna feel the same thing? You know, and so they're like, oh, it's kind of like changing their mindset of like, oh, it's not, I don't want to do this because you're gonna get mad at me. It's like because my friend is not gonna trust me anyway, you know. So like changing their way of thinking so that they can get more out of that relationship. So it's not coming from a place of fear for, you know, me or the teacher. And really what we try to do is make sure that the teachers are the authority figure, not like, oh, this is happening, and send them down to the office. That's not how it works here. It's like, this is happening, what do you think we can do in the classroom? And also, I had noticed a few years ago that a lot of our issues were coming from recess. And because it's more structured, and so this year I've been working really closely with the campus aides so that we can get a more structured feel to recess, so that, you know, I have definitely had less referrals coming from the yard, less kids injured. We established, as a staff, we established like playground rules and, you know, cafeteria, just because if they have norms in the classroom that they follow, they should have norms out in the yard for playing. And so, yeah, just making sure that everything is, you know, just better, like there's a better system for things, you know, even unstructured time.
Unstructured time needs to be structured.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I want to just start with the professional development. How do you guys determine every year, you know, what professional development for the teachers?
Good question. So, with professional development, there is a number of different structures we have that are pretty consistent. So we start with those because those stay consistent. One of those structures is called study groups. Study groups is a teacher-led aspect of our professional development. There's mentor teachers who apply to be a study group mentor, and it's a 2-year structure. So the same group of teachers meet together with the same mentor for the course of 2 years, and they are inquiring on a particular topic. So examples of particular topics that people are studying is how to best implement balanced literacy, or how to best co-teach, or the new next generation science standards, all of those different pieces. And that goes on for 2 years. Once a month, the mentor meets with the group, and they have a professional development that's dedicated towards their work. And then once a month, all the mentors come together as well, and they receive adult professional development. So how to lead adults, how to facilitate learning for adults, how to organize your budget, because they also all have a budget to work with. So that's an example of a structure that stays consistent. And we're entering our 3rd round. So this spring, teachers will apply to be mentors for the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. We'll select another 4 mentors, and they'll lead professional development over the course of 2 years.
Do you find like that structure, you know, you only have 4 for 2 years?
Mm-hmm. Between 4 and 5 groups, yeah.
Do you find that's motivating for teachers?
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of different purposes for it. One is to get staff collaborating in ways that they wouldn't collaborate otherwise. Another is to create some vulnerability in the staff. So one of the reasons we brought it on is we just felt like the staff didn't know each other's practices. So it sort of opened the door to teachers working with each other more authentically. And then the third reason is to create a pipeline of teacher leaders. So 3 of the assistant principals, for example, were all study group mentors at one point in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's a structure that I think if it went away, teachers would be really upset, because it's like one aspect that allows them to have choice and authenticity over their work. And teachers self-select into their groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it gives them some control over what happens in PB every year.
Exactly.
So those mentor teachers, they kind of determine what's happening in PD next year?
They determine what's happening in their study group, which is just one small aspect of PD. It's once a month. We have 3 other PD days a month that we meet, and in addition to other times during the month, that's like release time or coaching days. So that's just one structure that's consistent. When we're thinking about what the foci is for like our whole school, we start by looking at the data and thinking about what, really what we need. And so this year, the biggest push for us has been around math and supporting the implementation of the new Common Core math standards and really spending a lot of time on the practice of the standards for mathematical practice. So the practices around doing math. And that we sort of develop organically in whole school. So a lot of the PD that the teachers have been engaging with us is related to that. But I think ultimately, like, we plan our PD schedule for the year in August. It becomes very responsive, so sometimes it shifts and changes. But it's really focused on the concept, DeFore's research around job-embedded professional development. So everything that we do, we try to do within the context of the school and within the context of like problem solving and capacity building.
Talking to
Nancy.
And she says she wants teachers to be the authority figure.
Yeah.
A lot of schools struggle with teachers taking care of what happens in the classroom.
Yeah.
In the classroom.
Yeah. How do we do that?
So how do you, and that fits in with that PD of capacity building, so how do you get teachers on board? I mean, we've been trying to do that forever, but teachers just aren't on board with it. It's a lot easier to kick the kid out.
Totally.
So.
Well, it has to be a comprehensive approach because you can't just tell people to do that. Like, you also have to teach them how. And so a lot of it starts with relationship. So we do a lot of work around building relationships with kids. You saw a little bit of that this morning. We also ascribe to a philosophy of discipline and culture that is one of building students' like intrinsic desire to do what's right for kids, and to teach kids how to behave even when they're not there. So part of the challenge is that a lot of schools' systems and schools' structures for discipline are very much so based on rewards and punishments or consequences, and that doesn't over time teach kids about why they're making some of the behavior choices they are. And so that's sort of another comprehensive piece that goes into it, is that our philosophy is just sort of grounded in like an intrinsic, in pushing students' intrinsic desire to behave. But then very concretely, like, because we weren't always at this point, like we had one year where I remember I was like, if this teacher sends this kid out of the classroom one more time because he didn't bring a pencil, like, I'm going to walk the kid back myself. And so we spent a lot of time creating what's called our Comprehensive Student Support Team manual. And that outlines like the types of behaviors that teachers can send out from the class. And I think the second part of it is not enabling the behavior. So sometimes, kids are sent out and an administrator is afraid to address that with the teacher. Mm-hmm. And so we spent an entire year like really addressing some of those problematic situations where teachers would send and it wasn't an appropriate time to send, and directly addressing like why it wasn't appropriate, how that takes away power from the particular teacher and actually just reinforces the behavior. Because most behavior, and this is part of what we talk about in PD, most if not all behavior is a form of communication. And so it's important that teachers are able to understand that and address the communication and not necessarily the behavior, if that makes sense. Like, what are they trying to say? So it's been a long, progress, trip to that progress, a journey to get there. But it also is it has to be coupled with quality instruction, because I think the second reason kids misbehave is because the instruction isn't good. And so I think as school leaders, it's important to sort of see how all the systems and pieces work together, because instruction informs behavior, behavior informs instruction, relationships inform behavior, and they sort of have to all be working together in order for systems to really work well like that.
So I think one of the questions I would have is, people can do that really well and people do it really poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to see both.
Yeah.
I think in schools we often see how not to do it.
Yeah.
How did you figure out to do it well? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to do it well.
Yeah.
I have no idea if all the systems that we're putting in place,
Yeah.
how they're all going
If they work.
If
Yeah.
they work, and if,
Yeah.
you know, so what is the process of determining if a system is working?
Yeah.
And
Good
not only
question.
just that one system working, but if it's working well, connected to all of the other systems
Yeah.
to make a school run.
Constant reflection is one way that we do that. I think, particularly because this is our first year at this campus, we spent probably the entire first semester redefining systems. And we did a part of our leadership retreat this summer. An entire day was naming all of the systems and structures we had to reconsider, because we had been in a temporary space last year. And then spelling out what we were going to do for those systems and then trying them out. And for probably the first 2 months of school, we met every single day at the end of school and we said what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to change. Then we got to a point where it started raining here in Southern California, and we had to go back to our systems and say, okay, what do we now have to do when it rains? And we just spend a lot of time as a leadership team thinking about the different pieces, the different structures, and reflecting on whether or not they were successful. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of different teams who are responsible for different pieces. So supervision and recess is one whole system and structure. The Dean of Culture supervises the campus aides. She has weekly meetings with them where they reflect on what's working and what's not working. That's that's an ongoing part of the conversation.
Just within that one system.
Within that one system, yeah. And there's so many different systems here, and a lot of them can be carried over because we've been doing them for 15 years. They work. Attendance is one example of that. But some of them, no. How kids are picked up from recess and lunch had to totally change. And it went through several iterations before it got to the point where it is right now. But just another example is after school today and then after school tomorrow, my leadership team is hosting just an open forum to gather feedback onto the leadership team and structures and what else we can refine and strengthen and put in place. So the answer is that it's an ongoing process of reflecting on what's working and what's not, being aware of it, being open to the feedback, and then as a team brainstorming how to make it better.
Okay. And so structures for PD, you have the study group. Is there any other notable structures that you would like to mention?
Yeah. So every Thursday we have a release day, early release day, where the kids go home early and there's a professional development time for 2 hours. So that's just a structure that's in place to ensure that we're constantly dedicated towards that growth. In addition to that, there's something called lab site days that we host, which we try to do one per quarter for every team or department or grade span. It's a day where we sub out a number of teachers, depends on what the focus area is, and they have the entire day here on campus learning. And it's called a lab site because it's like they're in a lab learning how to do something in the moment. So let's say it's going to be on something like small group reading, which has been a focus this year based on data. We really wanted to implement consistent small group reading for kids so they were growing their reading level. So we subbed out the K2 team for a day. They start the day together. They usually do some sort of connecting activity and then some sort of reading on the research. So they might read from a prominent scholar with small group reading. They might watch a video. It's some sort of new learning. Then they go into a classroom, one of the K2 classrooms, and one of the instructional leads, so one of my assistant principals, will model whatever it is that we want the teachers to be learning. So they'll model it in the classroom, and all the teachers will be in there watching with our actual kids. Then they'll step out of that classroom when they're done. They'll have time to debrief it, talk about what they saw, what they learned. Then the teachers will plan the same thing. They'll go into another classroom and they'll try it out. They'll come out, they'll debrief it, and then they might do that one more time. And then they have about 2 hours of praxis time, so time to reflect and then apply it to their own classroom. We do that with all kinds of instructional practices here. It's one way that we have found we're able to develop people faster to get to implement the instructional frameworks that we have here much quicker, because they see it and then they try it out, versus like going to a training somewhere else and then coming back and maybe trying it out, but maybe like it's 3 weeks later and they forget what they were supposed to do.
So it's real time, let's learn this, go do
It's
it.
job embedded learning.
And the substitutes are there, but the teachers are in and out, so
Yeah.
the sub
Exactly.
is basically just there monitoring the classroom,
Yeah.
waiting for the teacher
Yeah.
to come back in.
So we do like 3 or 4 of those for all new teachers within the first 2 months of school. And we do it for literacy, we do it for language, and we do it for math, and then sometimes for culture and behavior. The big pieces of our approach, so that they can see it and try it out. And we don't expect them to be doing all parts of our instructional frameworks until about January, but we give them exposure and practice. And then the second piece is ongoing, really rich coaching and observation and feedback. So every single teacher has an instructional coach who's also their evaluator. And depending on the teacher's level of expertise or how long they've been teaching, they get ongoing coaching. So it could be more than weekly if it's a brand new teacher, could be weekly if it's a teacher who feels really comfortable and just wants an opportunity to reflect and grow. And then it could be bi-weekly if it's a teacher who's pretty proficient and is able to self-reflect and continue to grow their practice. But that happens for every single teacher at our school. And so in addition to like getting the learning in a job embedded way, they're also having an opportunity to sit and reflect and gain feedback weekly.
So it doesn't matter how long a person's been in the classroom, they still get coaching.
Everybody. Yeah. And it looks different, right? Because a teacher who's been teaching, like I have teachers up there who have been teaching 25 years, they're not getting the same kind of coaching that a second year teacher is getting, but they are getting a space with a coach to grow their practice. And the coaches are trained in different approaches, like cognitive coaching is one approach, to just provide that space to support their thinking.
And who are the coaches?
All my assistant principals. So there's 3 instructional coaches and me. I only coach a few people. I coach the most challenging. So I coach people who I evaluate people who need the principal to be their evaluator, and then they also have an instructional coach. So if I'm your coach, you have 2 people. When I wasn't a senior principal and I wasn't supporting 5 other schools like I am right now, I coached the same. I had an equal load of teachers here, but it just wouldn't be fair for me to coach 12 teachers here. I wouldn't be able to give them enough time. But my assistant principals each coach between like 8 and 12 teachers.
Challenging teachers.
Yeah.
That's another system for an administrator to put into place. How are we going to deal with that particular dynamic of student? So what do you do?
Well, it starts with hiring, right? So I try not to hire people who aren't aligned to our type of culture. Like, and you saw a little bit, the PD, like, if you don't want to, like, have connections or relationships with people, you're probably not going to work out well here, because sort of our approach is one that's based on just positivity, for one. So as long as you are aligned in the way that we do the work and the fact that the work is challenging, but like you want to be here trying it out every day and you're constantly trying to get better, like I'm going to be your biggest supporter. I think for me, what's really hard is when somebody doesn't see that they have areas of growth, somebody is negatively impacting the culture, or they're not collaborating. Like those would be the 3 areas of concern for me. I try to hire so that we don't have those issues, but ultimately, we're humans and issues come up. So one is directly addressing it. Like we don't let things or conflicts slide. We address them head on, and usually we try to address it from a very humanistic point of view. Like, I'm noticing you're very unhappy. Tell me a little bit more about that, rather than like, you did this and that's not okay. Like, we might eventually have to get to that point, but I try to address it first from a, like, what's going on with you as a human that's causing you to act this way. And then just holding people accountable. So like if I meet with you once and we have this conversation and I say like it's actually not okay for you to talk that way to people or refuse to do this or this, and you continue to do that, then you're going to be written up and it's going to be in your evaluation, and if it doesn't change, you're going to get an improvement plan, and if it still doesn't change, you're probably not going to return to work here. And in 9 years, I've had to only lay off 2 people for issues like that. Most people, by the time they get to the improvement plan, realize I actually have to do something here. And we've been able to coach everybody out of the improvement plan to date, with the exception of 2 people over 9 years. So, and I think that's like another piece is there's the trust there. So if I'm meeting with you, you're not necessarily thinking that it's because I'm going to fire you. Like there's not a history of that. It's because like I actually have expectations for you to grow. And I'll usually say with people like, right now you're not meeting my expectations. If I had to decide today whether or not I was going to bring you back next year, like the answer would be no. But I'm going to work with you until that day we have to decide. And I'm going to be really honest with you about how you're doing and where you're growing. So that's a big part. But I think just like communication around all of it is key. Like a teacher should never get to their evaluation, or a campus aide or a leader should never get to their evaluation and all of a sudden find out they're not meeting expectations. It has to be an ongoing conversation. And in the cases of both people I've had to lay off, both apologized to me. Like in the conversation where I was having to fire them, both of them said, I'm sorry, I couldn't meet your expectations. And I think what that shows is they felt supported to get there and recognized that they couldn't. And so it just wasn't a fit for them. It wasn't it wasn't like they didn't feel like it was unfair. And I think that's really important in creating a school culture where there's high expectations, but people feel supported to get there.
The instructional program, but how do you guys do that here? I mean, the PD obviously is a big part of that. But then since you're a K-8 school, there's a lot of vertical alignment that goes with that. As far as what does a kindergarten need to know to do first grade, and kind of how that program's building over the years. And then you also have that horizontal alignment, so making sure that all the teachers who are in particular grade levels are on the same page. So how do you communicate that instructional program?
So I guess the 2 parts that you're talking about are instruction within the classroom and the different programs that we're using, and the instructional framework with the support of our professional development that we provide. And it's a lot. So I think the basic one to start with will be the programs that we're using. So we don't particularly believe in purchasing programs. What we use currently are the Fountain Pinnell guided reading levels. And with that, that's our reading data that we gather on 3 times a year and throughout. We also, as far as reading and writing workshop model that we implement, so it's very open-ended and it's very specific and directed on the specific lessons that we have to teach. We have a specific curriculum and long-term planning that we do. And the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, teachers have time to reflect on how that's going and if they need to tweak anything. With that, we have also a lot of one-on-one support, small group support, which we call either strategy grouping or guided reading grouping, and the conferencing that happens in both reading and writing workshop. And then we also have, for the lower grade levels, we have a phonics instructional time. For that, there's a specific program, but that one just focuses on the letters and the sounds. But now teachers are, because they're able to cover that a lot faster now, now we're focusing on really trying to make a rich phonics instructional time that is directed, but also gives them the opportunity to practice that. And that's a conversation with K2. Not necessarily a program, but like something that we can do with group instruction. We also do word study, and this goes all the way to from K to 5th grade. And we this year we adopted whole school-wide the cognitive guided instructional framework for math, CGI. And what we are doing is we're focusing a lot of looking at each other's teaching, being able to support students through their thinking process, not necessarily looking for the correct answers, though we know that's important, but also helping students be able to articulate their thinking, their process, and their different strategies so they can learn from each other. So it's also like a math workshop time, because there's a lot of independent, individual, small group work that we come back and the real teaching happens in the share out from what the students are learning from each other. And as far as social studies and science, teachers create their own, and they follow the California standards, teaching standards. With middle school right now, we're really focusing in learning about the next generation science standards, and we've also reached out to different places to see, is there a suggested framework of how to teach and what to teach at specific times of the year. And as a state, we found out that we're not quite there. And so that the recommendation is to really dive in understanding what the next generation science standards are, and to create our own, because it's basically putting everything to the side and just creating units based on relative experiences for the kids, and with the new standards. For one thing, which is some of the PD that's happening right now, it's ELD instruction. We do have teachers teach 30 minutes of ELD 3 to 4 times a week. And this, what we do is students kind of like, teachers take a specific reading level, ELD level, and they switch kids at during those 30 minutes to support them the best they can in the ELD level that they're at.
So you create homogeneous groups for the teachers?
Right. Mm-hmm. And so this happens K through 8th grade. For 8th grade, we have a specific history teacher, for middle school, history teacher and a specific ELD teacher that comes in and supports just students for that aspect. So that's our instructional framework, if you want to say, very constructivist, very student-driven. There's a lot of communication as far as the units that we're teaching that students need, so that they can have that information when they move on to the next grade level, and a lot of cohesion with that. So we have a system in being able to put it in our data system so that everybody has access to that. And we have our periodic common planning times for teachers to plan, look at their framework, and I'm going now into the professional development time that is created for teachers to have the time to do all this, because they have to do a lot of creating themselves. And so this moves us into the different types of professional development we have. And there's many layers. So we have the traditional once a week, a short day where we have teachers meet with each other, and we have our general professional development that it's either reading workshop, which is a balanced literacy approach that we're having, or CGI, which is the cognitive guided instruction for math, or ELD that we're focusing on. And this is Thursdays, everybody. But sometimes on Thursdays, we also have another layer where we differentiate it depending on where we go K2, 3, 5, middle school, and within middle school we have the math and sciences and the humanities teachers that divide. Another layer we have there is what we call study groups. So teachers have selected an area of interest that they want to explore and learn about and go through the inquiry process. And other teachers select the one that is of interest to them. And so this is where we're creating leadership within our teachers. And they are responsible for creating agendas, looking to see what they want to cover during those times. And there's a budget that's provided to them for them to decide how they want to spend it, through instructional books or conferences, or having each other observe each other and having substitutes come and cover the classes so that they can do that, or just plan for themselves for that specific purpose. So some examples of groups that we have are, some are focused on the balanced literacy and reading and writing, others are focused on project-based learning, others are focused on math, CGI, and exploring that even more so, and others are within, I'm going blank, there's 7 of them. Different aspects of study groups, professional development that they want. Another layer is what we call lab sites, and this happens throughout the year, not necessarily on Thursdays. It happens during the school day. And based on our balanced literacy approach, we, the administrators, we are there's 2 assistant principals and our principal in residence and our senior principal. And the 4 of us work together in creating professional development that provides teachers with new teachers and those teachers that have been here with us, the structures that are needed to in areas that such as balanced literacy. So we spent a lot of time on reading workshop, writing workshop structures. We teach a lesson, we go into a classroom, we teach a lesson to our kids, we kind of model, and then teachers are put into groups and they plan a lesson themselves and they go back into the classroom and they teach that. So it's a practice, it's observing and practicing. And so there's a lot of support that goes on, and the rest of the afternoon is given to them to work with each other, and the subs are they're given the time to plan out how they're going to do that with the grade level partners or their same subject partners. So we do this for elementary and we do this for middle school, but obviously it's very different depending on what they're teaching in the grade level. And then it's not professional development, but we have a separate time that is just for operational stuff, like just not necessarily professional development, but all kinds of other things that, like emergency drills and things that are. So we completely separate that from the actual instructional framework. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then obviously the data tracking.
Definitely, that happens throughout the year. We have data meetings with all of the coaches. There's coaching as well that we all do. And we have a specific group of teachers, and we meet 3 times a year as a team, the general ed teacher and all the other teachers that are supporting the classroom with all the coaches and the senior principal to go over the data and really go student by student and identifying their growth, what they need if they didn't have enough growth, and what are some of the systems that we need to put in place to push them and move them forward.